Hello, everyone, and welcome to this. This will be the first time let me introduce myself, Jason Hackham, do a little bit of a live stream here as we break down a pay-per-view card. I maybe get into these for bigger for the UFC pay-per-views, obviously, probably some of the fight nights, and maybe even some Bellator or like LFA, CFFC regional type cards as well. But obviously, this is the first pay-per-view of 2022 from the Pond, or now the Honda Center in Anaheim, California, where we have not one but two title fights on this card. Obviously, main event, the heavyweight championship bout. Francis Ngannou defends against the current interim heavyweight champion in Ciryl Gane, and as well the trilogy fight for the UFC Flyweight Championship, as Brandon Moreno now defends against the former champion, the man he beat for the belt back in June, in Deiveson Figueiredo. And this is a card that I think would have been a lot better on pay-per-view if some of the fights that originally were for it had stuck. Obviously, they've moved the Cannonier Brunson fight from this pay-per-view to next month, UFC 271, which I guess maybe has a better fitting for the card, as this is going to be a show where the middleweight title fight's on the line, and obviously we lost some fights to this card here from injury and just bouts being moved or COVID, what have you. But I think the two title fights on this card are going to be worth for what I guess down in the States you're going to be paying now an up pay-per-view price, especially the intrigue going on with the heavyweight title situation, because we all know Francis Ngannou is the champion, but he's kind of on a rocky status with him and his agency, with the UFC management and Dana White. And, if he wins, he has to kind of stick around with the championship clause, but does he really want to stick around? What is he going to weigh his options to do something else in the realm of combat sports, whether it's boxing, maybe pro wrestling? I don't know, what have you. I mean, we'll get into that, but we'll start looking at this card, honestly, from the bottom all the way through the top. And one of the fights that is one that got changed was supposed to be last weekend, the first show of 2022. It was now moved to here at UFC 270. It's a women's flyweight bout. Kay Hansen, Jasudavicious. And, just looking at the tape index here of what Kay Hansen's done, only two fights here in the UFC, 1-1 so far. This is her first fight in the UFC since November of 2020, where she lost a unanimous decision 29-28 across the board to Corey McKenna back, as I said, in November of 2020. And, Kay Hansen in that fight and really throughout her fight was able to, dictate and have a good first round, won the first round on mine and all three judges' scorecards, was able to push the pace, get the fight to the ground, use her wrestling. And, really in the second round, the tide turn was McKenna with control using her wrestling. And then in the third round, it was actually McKenna was able to got taken down by Kay Hansen. And Kay was, looking in real good position, moved towards an arm triangle choke. But, McKenna was able to switch the positioning and, go for switch the arm triangle choke and then finish on top position, and was able to win a decision. But the interesting thing for me is this is a fight at 125. And not to say Kay Hansen hasn't fought at 125 before. A couple times in Invicta she had in her run there, but this is her first fight in quite a while at 125 pounds. I believe the last time she fought at flyweight was in September of 2019 in one of the Invicta Phoenix Series tournaments. And her whole run pretty much in the UFC, those two fights are at 115. And plus, there's a bit of that layoff, as we said, November 2020. That's a long time, a lot of time for her to grow as a fighter. But, ring rust and someone I truly believe is a thing. Whereas her opponent, Jasudavicious, is making her UFC debut here after getting a contract on the Contender Series back in September of 2021. And I honestly, I think a lot of people don't know much about Jazz. That's why a lot of people are already picking Kay Hansen to win this fight. But I'm going to ride here. If I'm going to pick someone, I'm going to pick Jasudavicious. I've said it before. I'll say it again here on this video. Before Jazz got signed to the UFC, I thought she was one of the best women out there at 125 pounds. she's had, bounced around between 115 as well, much like Kay Hansen had her lone loss is a very controversial split decision in CFFC for the CFFC Strawweight Championship to then champion Elise Reed, who's also now currently in the UFC at that division of 115. But I think Jazz at this weight is her best weight. And when she comes out, I think her wrestling training at Niagara Top Team with Chris Prickett, who's the head coach at Brock University, which is the best real wrestling program in all of Canada. I know the, youth sports versus NCAA, not really the same in terms, but very skilled program that Brock has. And, Chris Prickett's been able to make Jazz one of the more, solid fighters with her wrestling. She's going to be aggressive in your face, and Jazz is not afraid to brawl. Like, she can go out there and put you away, technically with elbows, with some big knees, body shots. I mean, if you just look at what she's done in her, road to getting to the UFC, whether it was in Cage Titans, that Kylie O'Hearn fight from September 2019, something you need to look at. Her fight in BTC that I called against, then Christina Ricker, now Christina Adcock, was just one-way traffic, just went 52 seconds, was a real dominating performance. And I think Jazz has that killer instinct. I haven't seen that much so far from Kay Hansen. So I would lean taking Jazz. I think Jazz, if she gets a finish, it would be probably maybe early in the fight, though don't want to discredit Kay. But I think Jazz finds a way to either get a finish early, or she'll have enough wherewithal to do enough damage, score enough points, and win a decision to probably pick up her first, which would be to pick up her first win inside the UFC octagon. And so that's why I picked that. Plus, I think she's just such a better fit at 125 than maybe Kay Hansen is. I think Kay's probably better still to stay at 115. And Jazz, I think, while she can fluctuate between the weights, when I spoke with her, she pretty much made it seem that she wants to stay at 125 pounds going forward. And I think that's the right decision. So as we move on to this card, we move up to the second fight on the prelims, Matt Frevola versus Genaro Valdez. Valdez is also a guy that's won a contract back in 2021 on the Contender Series, and what was quite an amazing, rock'em sock'em, parking lot brawl style fight against the likes of Patrick White, who was coming out of Alaska. Very interesting fight that was, where White misplaced his cup, finally got that put on, and then was able to dictate the pace, hurt the likes there of Valdez, and then Valdez in the second round was able to land a big punch that stunned White, drop him. And then if you look what Valdez has done in the coming up to the UFC, this will be his debut as well. Those two fights in Luke's, whether it was a first round rear naked choke against Edgar Guzman, and then the Miguel Artzimeni fight, where he pretty much just bolted through, runs through everyone. And I think that's a big step in the right direction. Obviously, coming in here 10-0 is impressive and has fought some good competition up there, but he's taking on Matt Frevola, who I think Frevola right now really has something to prove. And I think he even admitted it himself today at the media availability, pretty much saying like 2020 sucked for me, 2021 sucked for me, and 2022 has got to be my year. And I think Frevola, honestly, I think he just has too much wealth of experience going on in this fight. Honestly, I think obviously, you come out here, you lose a fight to Terrence McKinney in 7 seconds. That puts your mindset differently. I thought he had his moments in the Tsarian fight back in January of last year at UFC 257. And he's looking for that first one since October of 2019, where he had a split decision victory over Luis Pena. And as good as Valdez has been, getting his way to getting a contract in the UFC, I honestly think that this is Matt Frevola's time. Matt Frevola, sometimes desperate measures call for desperate times calls for desperate measures. And I think right now Matt Frevola is going to really get one, especially a big one, and avoid going 0-3 and get that first win since October of 2019. As we continue to go through the card, this was another fight that was supposed to be last weekend on the debut show for UFC in 2021. It's a strawweight bout. Vanessa Demopoulos versus Silvana Gomez Juarez. Gomez Juarez, who made her debut back in October of last year, kind of had it put on her pretty decisively by Lupita Godinez. And, she's going to look to bounce back. Obviously, was supposed to have a quick turnaround, was Gomez, but that didn't work out. And then this fight got moved around. And her opponent, Vanessa Demopoulos, I mean, this is a girl that was the former strawweight champion in the LFA. I think, Vanessa, her UFC debut was on super short notice against JJ Aldridge, was supposed to have a fight in her own right back in LFA on August 27th, and then made her debut August 28th. So kind of things turned around, and JJ Aldridge really had her way with her. So I don't really hold that much against Demopoulos. I think Demopoulos has better wrestling, the better striking, and I think, honestly, I could see Vanessa Demopoulos getting a first or second round finish in this one. And Vanessa Demopoulos, I mean, as you said, former LFA champion at 115 pounds, and you need a fight to look up, just know how tough and durable she is. Look up the Lupita Godinez fight that they had back in the LFA, one of the best rock'em sock'em fights where both women's faces were just absolutely brutalized, and just showcasing two of the top, newer female faces in the UFC. But yeah, I would definitely run with Demopoulos in this one as well. Then we move to the bantamweight division on the prelims here. Tony Gravley versus Simon Oliveira. Tony Gravley, guy, obviously he's trained at an American Top Team, coming off that loss to Nate Manis back in September of 2021, and had a nice little run going. He had a 2-fight win streak with wins over Geraldo de Freitas and Anthony Burchak back in November 2020 and then April of last year. So he looks to find a way to get things back on the right track. And this is a guy with, very heavy hands for a bantamweight, can really use his wrestling in there as well, and find a way to just push the pace against here in Simon Oliveira, who will be making his debut in the UFC after getting a contract from the Contender Series back in September of last year. And I mean, this is a guy, though, that coming into the UFC now is a very world-traveled fighter, having fought in Pancrase in Japan, ACB in Russia, obviously fighting in his own country of Brazil. But you go out there and you fight in those different atmospheres, those different levels of talent that he's fought, and with the likes of, fighting in Russia, fighting in Japan. I think that makes him a bit of a wild card in what he can do. I had a split decision win to get the contract against Jose Alday on his Contender Series fight. Gravley's really tough. I think, if anything, Gravley's going to take this one by decision, but I think Oliveira may surprise some people, especially with how durable he is and just the kind of fights that he has had in his career. I mean, if he's going to get a finish, it's going to be a submission, as when you look at what he's done, 11 of his 18 wins have come by way of submission. But I honestly think Gravley's just has too much experience of fighting in the UFC, and some of the guys that he has fought, whether, it was a loss to Brett Johns or, as we said, the Burchak and de Freitas victories, and Nate Manis is obviously also a real tough guy in his own right as well. Only one loss as a professional. So I like Gravley. I think Gravley finds a way to get this one done by decision. Then as we move through the card and go up to the welterweight division, it's Jack Della Maddella versus Pete Rodriguez. Pete Rodriguez only 4-0, but this is a guy that is 4-0 with 4 wins, all coming by way of first-round finish, and that's in violent form, and one of those includes a 10-second flying knee with some ground and pound as well. So all of his fights were in the Icon Fighting promotion from October of 2020, where he made his pro debut, to June of last year. And, obviously the toughest guy he fought was the last guy he fought in Roberto Plixi, where he had a first-round finish there, was 5-1 coming into the bout. And, I think you may have to want to look at this one and look at the level of competition. Obviously, you're making your debut in a promotion and trying to groom your way up. Now 4-0 as a professional. But Jack Della Maddella, I thought, had one of the best fights and best performances on the Contender Series last year, whether it was, the fight against Angie Lusa. I think really he's just, a sensational fighter, someone I think that could be real problems in the welterweight division as his time goes, and, spending most of his fighting career done in his native Australia with the well-renowned Eternal MMA promotion. And he goes out there and he finishes fights as well He's got a couple quick finishes, like a win in 2018 in 2 minutes and 27 seconds, win back in 2020 and just 112 time of work. I think this is a well put together guy that can really just mix up his style of striking and has faced adversity. He started his pro career off at 0-2 and is now a 10-2 fighter. So he is now riding a 10-fight win streak, and I think he's got it all together right now. He's in the zone, a little bit more experience, and looked like he was UFC worthy when he made his UFC day or Contender Series fight, I should say, back in September of last year. As we continue through this card, moving up, it's another Contender Series alum here in Michael Morales, Trevin Giles, another welterweight bout here. Morales 12-0 as a professional mixed martial artist, a national wrestling and Muay Thai champion from his home country of Ecuador, but has been fighting and spending a lot of time in Mexico, training out of Extreme Fitness out there in Mexico. And, he beat a real experienced guy to get that contract in Nikolai Vertaikanov back on his Contender Series fight. I mean, Vertaikanov was a guy that pretty much needed to win that fight and would have gotten a contract, as he was a guy that Dana saw, and we saw him on Looking for a Fight, had a very one-sided beating against Anthony Ivy back in Fury FC, and then he ran into Michael Morales, and Michael Morales, he ended that fight with an exclamation point, a beautiful German-style overhead, belly-to-back throw, and, showcasing why he was a national wrestling champion in Ecuador. Spent some time as well fighting in UWC in Mexico, which is one of the more top promotions out in Mexico. So this is a guy that and also showcased that wrestling in that fight, was able to really take down the proper Kazakhstanian there in Vertaikanov and control the fight, work for some ground and pound, and more so control the positioning and not really let him get anything going. But Trevin Giles is a different animal, and it's a real tough test to make your pro debut. They call him the problem, and he definitely is the problem. I mean, his last fight back in July, ran into one of the not best signings I think the UFC's had in a while from South Africa in Dricus du Plessis. But, since then, like, other than that fight, he's beaten James Krause. He's beaten Bevon Lewis. He's beaten Roman Dolidze. And, he's got 2 losses in the UFC there to Gerald Meerschaert, no excuses there, and Zach Cummings. And those were at middleweight. So I think him at this weight class of 170, I think, is going to be the better situation for him going forward. This will be his first fight here at 170 pounds since, realizing that 185 just wasn't big enough, was a little too small for the weight class. And I expect him to maybe have a little bit too much power. We'll see how he stuffs the takedowns. I think he'll be able to do that, especially with some of the likes of the guys that he's fought on his journey, in the UFC and then to the UFC. I think he'll be able to stuff the takedowns. But you know what? You don't want to mix it up on the feet, especially someone that's a Muay Thai champion. But I like Giles in this one. Not sure how he officially gets it done, but I think Giles just has too much experience there for the Ecuadorian in Michael Morales. And then continuing to move up the card, this is, I think, going to be one of the better fights on this card. It's Hannibal Salas versus Victor Henry. Henry making his UFC debut. And this is a fight that was supposed to happen back at the last card of 2021 in December 18th to be exact. Then it was canceled due to COVID protocols. Then they moved it to what was supposed to be next weekend, or the last weekend's card. And then they moved it back here to UFC 270. As it comes up this weekend. And, Victor Henry is, I think, one of the more solid signings the UFC's had, and I'm happy that they outright signed him, didn't have to make him go through the gauntlet of trying to win a contract on the Contender Series. This is a very skilled bantamweight, 21-5, and he spent most of his time fighting in Japan. This is a very experienced pancrase fighter, a champion in deep. And he just most recently returned stateside and won the Lights Out Fighting Bantamweight Championship over Albert Morales, who himself is a UFC veteran, so UFC and Bellator veteran. So look, and the other thing you got to take into consideration for Victor Henry, trains with Josh Barnett at that UWF USA team. And so, Josh Barnett, one of the greatest heavyweights to ever compete in mixed martial arts. He's got the ability to just, use wrestling when needed, but I think Henry can really let his hands go and use those hands to get to set up some takedowns. And when he gets in there, look out for the submissions, because the submissions are very, very impressive for what Henry can do. The majority of his victories have come by way of submission. 8 of those 21 have come by way of submissions. And I'm very excited to see what Victor Henry can do against the very dangerous Haneo Barcelos here, as he will be looking to get back into that groove. As Barcelos came in to the UFC, fighting, former champion for the RFA, which is now the part of the LFA after the merger with the Legacy Fighting Championships. And, look what he did. He wins over Kurt Hollabaugh, Chris Gutierrez, Carlos Huchin, and then a decision victory over Said Nurmagomedov. And, he was really building up a nice set of wins. And then really the pandemic hit, and things haven't really just worked out. We're supposed to fight Cody Stamann back in March of 2020. And then obviously that's right at the beginning of a pandemic. Decision win of Khalid Taha. And, just had fight after fight from the end of 2020 to going up to pretty much June of last year, just get canceled, whether it was Rafael Sunsao, couldn't have that fight. Sunsao pulled out. Then the Marcelo Rojo fight, Barcelos, he had COVID and then lost a majority decision to Timur Valiev back in, as I said, June of 2021, and was supposed to fight Trevin Jones. And then Victor Henry comes in here, and this fight gets pushed back. So I'm more interested to see how the likes here of Barcelos can, come through that. There's a lot of time off, a lot of time to grow, but, still what lingering effects of COVID have been in there. Maybe that affected him in the Valiev fight. And how does he handle, the pressing of this, guy that realizes in Henry, this is a big opportunity for me. I'm 30, he's 34, much like Barcelos, and trying to make the most of this opportunity and, riding high in confidence and having been a little bit more active, as Henry's title win in lights out fighting was back in October of this past year. So the end of October. And that I tend to like to see guys that are having fights that have been a little bit more active like that, unlike Barcelos. So you know what? I'm going to go with Victor Henry. I think Victor Henry pulls off the upset and really showcases why he's one of the best bantamweights going on. And, Tapology even has him ranked as the best bantamweight in all of Japan. So I don't know if a lot of people would agree with that, but that's what Tapology says. And, you fight in Japan for as long as he's been fighting and been active, I think put some respect here on Victor Henry. I think Victor Henry gets the upset over Barcelos come Saturday night. And then the feature prelim is just one that's going to be super exciting. Ilia Topuria takes on Charles Jourdain. Charles Jourdain taking this fight on 9 days notice and coming off a very impressive win. I'd say one of his best performances in the UFC back on that last show, December 18th, against Andre Ewell, where he ended the fight with one of the most devastating front kicks I've seen delivered since, the early days of the UFC that had been delivered to Ewell there. And, as well for Jourdain, he's signed a new contract with the UFC. That Ewell fight was the last of that deal. He's got a brand new contract. Anyone think he wants to, go out there and make a statement here against the very dangerous Ilia Topuria? And, Topuria was on the MMA Hour on Wednesday basically saying, like, look, it's a short notice fight for Jourdain, but it's a short notice fight for me, as I have to really change my game plan, as this was supposed to be Mosvar Ivalov coming on into this fight. And, obviously we've seen what the likes here of Topuria has done. That very impressive ground and pound finish against Ryan Hall and that unorthodox style that Ryan Hall has back in July. And then before that, at the end of 2020, the first round finish over Damon Jackson. And as well, I think, he's just part of this wave of Georgian MMA that's really continues to be one of the top countries out there. Obviously, things didn't go Giga Chikadze's way last weekend, but I still think he's just he may be the next guy in line here at 145 pounds, or working his way towards that at least, and being on the short call list. I'd take Topuria, but I think Jourdain makes this one heck of a fight. And I guess the other interesting thing that goes to say with this is Jourdain's fighting on a card headlined here by Ciryl Gane and Francis Ngannou, and it wouldn't be the first time that Jourdain has fought on a card that Ciryl Gane has fought on. Obviously, they fought together on a card in TKO back at TKO, I believe it was TKO 47. That was, I believe, the debut of Ciryl Gane as a professional mixed martial artist. And they also fought on that South Korea show back at the end of 2019. And every time Jourdain and Gane have fought on the same show, that is usually something that bodes very well for both of the fighters. They're so far 2-0 in that scenario where they fight on the same card. So maybe that's something to sprinkle in where they make it the hat trick and come away with the victories going on. It was actually the TKO Fight Night card back in August the 2nd of 2018. I think that was a dark show that didn't really air anywhere. But honestly, I think Jourdain's going to make it a fight, but I would take Topuria to get a finish, maybe late first, middle of the second round against Charles Jourdain. But I think Jourdain definitely should get rewarded with another fight with a proper camp that's kind of up in the statures. He's kind of doing the UFC a favor to keep Topuria on this card. And then as we move to the main card, and one that is, I think, as we talked about, certain fights were supposed to be on this card that have been moved or had fallen off due to injury or just changing the bout replacement. So a couple Brazilians will kick us off on this main card. It's Rodolfo Vieira versus Wellington Turman. Turman coming on here with a hot win one, lose one kind of mentality. Has losses coming into his last fight against Sam Alvey, where he had a split decision victory, where he'd lost 2 in a row to Andrew Sanchez and Bruno Silva. And Vieira, this past year, it was part of one of the biggest upsets where his grappling skills, obviously how good of a jiu-jitsu player Vieira is coming into to his career in mixed martial arts. And he was submitted by Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, was able to bounce back though with that in July with a rear naked choke victory over Dustin Stulfuss, excuse me. But I would honestly take the black belt hunter in Rodolfo Vieira here. I just think, he's got a lot to prove. I think his ground game is going to be the difference maker, and just too much here for Wellington Turman to find a way to get the victory. And I would just take the black belt hunter in this one. Honestly, I think his ground game is going to be too much, and I don't know how we're going to see Turman be able to stop that one. Then moving back to the bantamweight division, Cody Stamann versus Said Nurmagomedov. I think this is a very important fight here for Stamann. And Stamann coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak, and just had, rough situations with fights getting canceled and, getting reorganized. And he's, coming off a tough one-way traffic fight against, Merab who's maybe gunning for himself to be a future champion in this 135-pound division. And, I think this is a big, important fight here for Cody Stamann. I think Stamann needs to, go out there and just, leave no stone unturned and push the pace and find a way and do everything he can to avoid the takedowns that Nurmagomedov's going to bring to the table here. And just what the striking as well. Like when you look at what Said Nurmagomedov done his last fight, that 51-second left hook, which led to ground and pound finish against Mark Striegel back in October of 2020, was very impressive. His only loss was to Ronnie Barcelos, who is fighting on this card as well. So I think he's got a good set of hands, this Nurmagomedov, but I think he's going to find a way to push the pace and use his wrestling and look for a submission. And I think he may find a way to get that done against Cody Stamann, who still a guy that I think has a lot to offer, but he's just been handled with a lot of tough competition recently. And I think Nurmagomedov's going to be another one of those guys that, makes it a tough night for him. And then, back to the welterweight division. This one kind of intrigues me. It's the final fight before we get to our title fights in Michel Pereira and Andre Fialho. And Fialho is a guy that, you want to look at how good of a 2021 he had. I'd put him up there with Chris Curtis for how solid his year was. He went 4-0 in 2021, put James Vick into retirement at the very first XMMA show back last January. It was an 18-second victory in UAE Warriors. And then 2 other very impressive first-round finishes in UAE Warriors last year. And it really kind of corrected the trajectory of his career because, things didn't go his way when he was a member of the PFL. Did lose a fight actually to Chris Curtis, which is kind of ironic how their years had gone. He went 0-2 with 1 no contest in the PFL. Actually, I should say 0-1 with a no contest. And then when he went to the LFA, he lost the unanimous decision to Antonio Dos Santos Jr. And you thought maybe this guy wasn't, all that we thought could be. And then he just, proved everyone wrong, had a great year and training at Sanford too, which is one of the best gyms in all of mixed martial arts. But I think Pereira's size and style may pose a little bit of a problem, though you don't want to get in too close because the power that Fialho has is very dangerous, put your lights out quickly. And the only losses that Pereira has had in the UFC are obviously that, huge unanimous decision loss where he pretty much just gassed out against Tristan Connolly and had missed weight and all that. And then the illegal knee loss where Diego Sanchez just said, yeah, I don't want to continue. So he has that. And, since then he's been on a 3-fight win streak. One of those being a finish, a rear naked choke in the 3rd round with just about 20 seconds left in the fight. And I think he can handle the guys with power. We saw what he could do against Chaos Williams and Nico Price. So I think Pereira finds a way to get this one and probably racks up another unanimous decision against the very dangerous Andre Fialho. But I'm happy to see Fialho in the UFC. I think this is where he belongs, especially after how big his year was last year. And then we move to the co-main event where the UFC Flyweight Championship is on the line. Brandon Moreno defending against Deiveson Figueiredo. And I think the biggest question is how much more improved do we see a Deiveson Figueiredo? Because, he looked fantastic in 2020, especially with the big wins over Joseph Benavidez, especially the one where he won the title because he did miss weight in the first time. Pretty much one-way traffic, quick work against Alex Perez, and then the unbelievable first fight with Moreno. But then last year in the rematch, this is a guy that was the last one to weigh in on the scales back at UFC 263. And I think that did have some effect, maybe some weight cutting issues. I don't know, but he definitely didn't look like the same God of War that we are used to up against Brandon Moreno, who has really just turned it on. Obviously is the champion going into this fight and has just, been one of the best stories in all of the UFC. And he may be the guy that knows how to beat in Figueiredo, get the fight to the ground, and you showcase and make sure you're in top control and find a way to take the back to get that rear naked choke. But I think the interesting thing with this fight is Figueiredo's made some game plan changes, realized that wasn't the Figueiredo that brought him to the championship, and is now training there with Eric Del Fierro and Henry Cejudo. So I think that makes it a bit of an interesting fight where Cejudo had spent time training with Brandon Moreno. So Cejudo can definitely help and know what Moreno was like and what holes you can fix in there. They've obviously watched the tape and showed some study of that. And I think we're going to see a better performance from Figueiredo. And I think we're going to see a better in shape Figueiredo, one that can definitely handle the gas tank. Probably, I think maybe we'll see him be one of the earlier guys to weigh in just to prove that all the doubt about my ability to make weight is going to be gone. I think he's going to find a way to come out here. I think we're going to see the Figueiredo that we're used to seeing, where he lets his hands go and maybe we get this one to be a little bit more stand up, stuff some of those takedowns. And I think he finds a way to win a unanimous decision to regain the title. And I think that those changes are just going to be very important. And I think Moreno is a very good champion. I think Moreno has had, the best success and has showcased what a warrior he is. But I think Figueiredo makes the adjustments needed to be in the third fight. And it'll be interesting to see if that is the case come Saturday night. Do they make a fourth fight? Because who knows? All depends how things go. And there are contenders waiting in the wings at 125 pounds, whether it's a Pantoja or a Manel Cap. So we shall see what happens. But I honestly think Figueiredo finds a way to get this done against the assassin baby, Brandon Moreno. And we have a new champion. And already in early 2022, champions have had a rough go with, defending their belts. We saw last week in Invicta where Zapatella lost her title there. And KSW, out of the 2 title fights, a new light heavyweight champion was crowned. So champions have not had the best of luck so far early in this new year of mixed martial arts. So I look with a card like this, maybe we get another champion, and I think Figueiredo is one of them. And then moving to the main event here, this is the fight that, everyone's, got circled on their calendars and is just very excited to see what happens in this fight because there's so much intrigue. Obviously, Francis Ngannou wins the heavyweight championship, and then there's this whole contract dispute about when they wanted him to fight. UFC kind of putting him on the side. Ciryl Gane goes in and becomes the interim heavyweight champion, and obviously the history with Fernando Lopez, who used to be Francis Ngannou's coach, helped kind of re-guide his career and put things in the right trajectory after those 2 poor performances against Stipe the first time out, and then in the the first fight with Derek Lewis, which is obviously one of the worst fights ever. But it was Fernando Lopez that was in the corner there with France in the second Curtis Blades fight where he put him away, and then Ngannou's been training there with Eric Nixick at Extreme Couture, and this is a guy that obviously you'd think would be just the easiest guy to market. Especially, he's got that scary Mike Tyson presence. He goes in there, he can put you away quickly. Look what he's done pretty much since that Blades fight was 45 seconds. Cain Velasquez was 26 seconds. The Junior Dos Santos fight was 1 minute and 11 seconds. The Rosenstruck fight, 20 seconds. And Stipe Miocic, he put away 52 seconds into the second round. But we did see a lot of improvements of Ngannou. There were some questions of if he's just going to be, a big brute with the big power, but he did show some improvements. Miocic did come in there, shoot for a takedown, and it was a beautifully timed sprawl by Francis Ngannou, which does spell problems for a lot of people in the heavyweight division. For a heavyweight with that much power, that much size and mass that can find a way to stuff takedowns, I think that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. But I don't know if Ciryl Gane's the one. Ciryl Gane obviously comes into this fight as the interim heavyweight champion, where he just was able to read Derek Lewis, in those first 2 rounds. And when it was time to put Derek Lewis away, he put Derek Lewis away with the ground and pound. Has had some very impressive performances. The Volkov performance back in last June was one of, I think, the best we've seen Gane have. This is a heavyweight that can not only knock you out or TKO you, but he's got, a heel hook submission and an arm triangle submission in the time in the UFC. So if the fight does hit the ground with some grappling, which would be very rare, especially with these guys kind of stand-up backgrounds, I would think you would have to lean Gane. I think Gane just knows how to, he's not going to get overzealous or rush in and try to put someone away, especially the caliber of Francis Ngannou, like we saw where Stipe Miocic in the fight back last March, where Miocic hurt and then got a little overzealous, and he got paid with a counter right hand that just, blew Miocic back like, he was in a bit of a car wreck or something like that. So honestly, I think what we're going to see here is a smart rack up the points, not get too overzealous, use my Muay Thai that Ciryl Gane can do. And then if he's able to land a combination and hurt Francis Ngannou, I think he's going to find a way to put Ngannou away. And that's going to be the time there. But I don't think he's going to get overzealous. He's such a smart guy. And I think the big factor in this as well is Francis Ngannou is kind of in this, whether it's the contract situation with the UFC, kind of more the beef towards now Ciryl Gane's coach and Fernando Lopez, obviously, as we said, and Ngannou's former coach. And Gane's kind of just in the background here. And he's, no animosity or anger is being taken towards him. So I think, honestly, that's why I'm going to take Gane. I think he may get a finish. I'd say maybe 3rd or 4th round, as that just seems to be the style of how Gane fights recently. He'll just, figure you out and then put you away. in the third or the fourth if we get to championship rounds. And I think he's got the gas tank as well if we go to those later rounds. I still don't know about Francis Ngannou with his cardio. As we talked about the short amount of time in with those early finishes, up to the title fight where he won 42 seconds into the second round. He has been past, he hasn't gone the distance in quite a while since the first Stipe fight and the Derek Lewis fight, which was just a fight where they respected each other too much and was one of the worst MMA fights of all time. But I still think if this fight finds its way going the distance, definitely I favor Gane as well. So I think we're going to see two exciting championship fights, and I expect maybe we'll see two exciting new champions in the realm of mixed martial arts. So I mean, there's a good question going on here. How good is Gane's chin? That's the question. Does he take a big shot like that? That is a very good point there made by Sinister Story here as well, because we haven't seen Gane take a shot, but I think that's just the one of the questions on why that's the question. We haven't seen him take a shot. We don't know how he's going to react. If he gets tagged, I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. But I don't think he puts himself in the position to get tagged. He's fought heavy-handed guys before, with his miraculous run in MMA. Like when he debuted in TKO, like his second fight, he won the TKO Heavyweight Championship against Adam Deitzka, who was, a fight away from going to the UFC. And then that fight was so one-sided for how he was able to control and showcase his striking that, Deitzka got out of MMA and went to pro boxing. And I think I can just see right now Gane finding himself not putting himself in the situation to take the big shot. He's going to, fight that smart fight, land my shots, step away, and, use movement as well. I think Gane does a very good job using movement and won't put himself in a scenario to get hit very much and put in the big power and maybe use Francis Ngannou to try to throw those big shots and tire himself out, punch himself out as the fight goes into the later rounds. But I'm expecting two new champions to be crowned here on Saturday night at UFC 270, and it's very, very fun pay-per-view. And it does suck that pay-per-view prices have been upped in the United States if you want to watch this one, but these are two very solid fights. I think kind of worth the price of admission. I think you're going to get, if the Moreno and Figueiredo fight is even close to what the first fight was, I think someone definitely has the chance to get things going there and be a fight of the night candidate. And two of the best heavyweights as well with a history. Who doesn't like that? So I think that's going to be a solid way to kick off the pay-per-view run for the UFC here in the year of 2022. But that's how I have, run through this card. Hopefully, maybe if you're a bettor, you can take some of the knowledge I've brought to you towards your bets. I am expecting a couple, big debuts here and with Jasudavicious and some real fun fights, especially the last two prelim fights. Like I said, the Barcelos Victor Henry fight and the Topuria Jourdain fight. Expect some real big fireworks. But all in all, enjoy. I hope when Saturday comes around, everyone can sit down, enjoy the fights, and we'll be back to preview the next UFC card, which is actually going to be in 2 weeks' time. We'll get a date set up for that and figured out. But 2 weeks, we'll have a week off, and we can just soak in all the high-level mixed martial arts and the stories that come out of this show, because there's going to be plenty after Saturday night. So for that, thanks for joining. Definitely don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe as we'll be back to break down more cards and do a little bit more fun stuff live on this channel as this year progresses. So with that, I'm Jason Hagholm. Peace out. We'll see you all next time.